Gathering around the table to play a board game is a sacred moment of pure fun, exploration, and stories that unite people like nothing else. The people who play board games know that very well. It's a world where ideas come alive, where challenges await, and where friendships are forged through cardboard, pieces, and immersive gameplay. But what is the story behind each board game? Where do ideas for new games come from, and how are they transformed into the cardboard and components that you find on your table? This is the story of Czech Games Edition, a publisher from Czech Republic who 16 years ago started their journey into making board games that today have sold millions of copies. But back then, it was just a bunch of friends united by their love for exceptional games, trying to find a way to bring this game into the world. Yet, this is not just their story. It's a story for every game enthusiast, every player who has experienced this profound joy of playing, and a celebration of what makes this hobby so special. In the last 2 decades, the hobby has grown so much that the industry churns out over 3,000 new releases each year. But the board game scene in the 90s was drastically different, and dedicated board gamers were faced with limited options and a longing for something more. The big shift occurred in 1995, opening the floodgates to a new era of game mechanics and inspiring the modern board game wave.
I always liked board games from my childhood, and I played them a lot, but I always have kind of struggled to find friends who would like to play games with me. Actually, early '96, I was at a retreat which we had for our class at university in the mountains, and there I played Settlers of Catan. It was less than half a year after they were introduced, and no one knew this game here in Czech Republic, but one girl had it there that her grandmother living in Germany actually sent this to her that it is a good game. So I played it for the very first time back then in '96, and I was blown away because it was something on another level than what was available here, because during the communism era we didn't have access to more modern board games which were developed in the Western countries. So we had a lot of knockoffs like our version of Monopoly and so on.
I felt like a little bit like before 15 years ago or something like even 10 years ago, it was like a little bit strange to say somebody that's playing board games a lot or something like that. It was, unusual.
It was awesome. It was relatively small at that time, and it was really friendly. It was not about business or something like this. It was really about geeks or friends that are meeting, playing games. There was several board gaming events around the Czech Republic, and when we were attending them, we were meeting basically the same people everywhere, and I have the greatest memories of this.
In early 2000s, more exciting games appeared and nurtured a brand new wave of board gamers.
At some point, I don't know, definitely after 2000, I realized that some companies are actually publishing these games in Czech here already. That was that first company I was aware of that was Albi, and they brought Settlers of Catan and Carcassonne here to Czech, and I was blown away again. And at some point I realized, okay, here are some conventions, usually sci-fi and fantasy-oriented conventions, where actually people started playing board games also, as a kind of side thing. So I went to one of these events, and that was where I actually met Vlaada for the very first time. I think it was something like 2005 or 2004, something like that. And yeah, he brought his prototype, and not just one, more than one. And I played it, I really liked it, and we played some other games together. And I was looking always forward to next gaming event when he will bring his prototypes. Yeah.
He's kind of different guy, and I believe Vlaada thinks in a way how regular people just don't think. He just thinks the other way around, and that's amazing.
This is how I met Vlaada in a company, but before that we already knew each other from like meetings. We went at one of the very popular activities where back then were this what's now called LARP games. So back then we called them we didn't call them. It was like we packed up our wooden swords and whatever we found, and we went out. And one of the action where we replayed was Lord of the Rings. We organized it in an area above Brno, so north from Brno, which is quite like wild. What's quite interesting is how I remember him back then when we were going for the LARP games. You know, he was this basically thin young guy who was running all the time up and down with a sword or with something like that, and in the evenings we were sitting and playing guitars and singing, and now I don't see him running up and down that much. You know? That slightly changed.
Yes, actually we were playing Dračí doupě, which was Czech version of Czech role-playing game similar to Dungeons and Dragons. And we also, with these people, we kind of started some fantasy club, and we were also starting to going to LARPs. I believe in the first Lord of the Rings LARP outside. I was playing Aragorn, and Finder was playing Gollum. And I have great memories from these times. It was so adventurous, so like epic and so on. And we continued then some, you know, sieging a castle, LARPs. It was mostly battles. Yeah, it was mostly battles, not what you would call LARP probably today, with lots of costumes and lots of role playing. It was much more about physical combat and so on, but it was really great. It's very hard to say when I started to create board games, because I don't remember times where I was not creating board games. You know, I was creating games like as a kid, yeah, and then as a high school student and university student and so on. It's just, the question is when I started to be like professional board game designer, and I can answer this too, because I still don't feel that way. I don't see this as a career. I still see as a great hobby that became my job, but there was no particular moment when I decided, okay, I will be a board game designer. Yeah, it just happened.
I was really happy for the games from Vlaada, because I remember like we've been playing like the old Arena, like one of his first games, I would say, and we've been playing a ton of it, like over and over, as I said.
Arena was my first published game, and I was doing board games before for my friends, for people around me. And actually, the unique thing about this game is that before I was never thinking about some of my games could be published. Not that I was thinking they are not good enough, I was just not thinking this way. We loved board games, me and my friends, and I created more of them, just for us. Yeah? Prophecy is the first game I made like on demand. The publisher told me, hey, we need a game that will appeal to players that like Talisman. So I said, okay, I will try, and I created Prophecy. And also, it was first board game I created that was play tested on computer. Just myself, there was no multiplayer, but I just was playing for all players, for all characters myself, and that was something that defined my work style later.
Vlaada is a programmer, and he likes to develop the games and prototypes on his computer. And so it's just natural for him to be testing it there. And so they created a platform on which it was possible for other people to test as well. And so most of the games from Shipyard to 3 Ages, Tashkalar, they were all tested online. I just still remember the first Vlaada's prototypes. They were so cute. Every time he made these kind of like these smiley faces there and like his beautiful graphics of everything. Yeah, you should see Vlaada's prototypes. Actually, if you look at, it wasn't published by CG, it actually was a smaller game. It was published by one little community in Czech Republic, just 200 copies, a Merryman of Sherwood. And it has the original Vlaada's graphics on it. It's so much fun.
He used this clever Teufel way of playing with English to make it different, but fun. So we published it and we played it and enjoyed it. And I was thinking for some time, because I already had some experience with doing some business, that maybe I should offer Vlaada to publish his game Greenland. But then in 2006, he came to Prague to again another gaming event here, and he showed me Through the Ages. Back then we just called it a Civ game.
I always liked a Civilization computer game. You know, I thought myself, why this great theme, the whole history of mankind is not a board game yet. And I created some game with this theme, some more epic game, and my friends really liked it. I was not really happy about some few things. At one moment I stopped working on this game because Sid Meier's Civilization board game was published. I said, okay, this is not needed anymore because I don't have to do it if someone else did it. And then I played it and it was like, that's not really what I had in mind. So I continued on Through the Ages, and that's why I created Through the Ages, to have a game with this great theme of all mankind history.
I played it for the very first time, something like 8 hours, with Láďa Smejkal, and I felt like, okay, this is the best game I ever played. And after that experience from that event, I felt like it makes no sense to not publish this game. And I knew from the previous time that Vlaada was actually actively trying and pitching his games to mostly German publishers, but they were not interested in some games from unknown designer from Eastern Europe. So they always turned him down. So I was kind of thinking about this more and more, and on another event in May, I actually came to Vlaada, but I was not the only one who came with this idea.
The game was so thrilling, so awesome that we were like, we should try to somehow publish it, self-publish. So maybe 4 of us sat together and we were like, hey, let's do this.
And we managed to make it happen for Essen, which was not easy, but it was interesting.
Essen Spiel is one of the biggest board game trade fairs, and it was first held in 1983. It is a 4-day event held in Essen, Germany, usually in October of every year from Thursday to Sunday, and it's where most of the new games make their first release to the public.
Our original intention with Through the Ages and generally publishing game was that we are not professionals. So we decided that we will get the smallest possible booth in Essen, which was 2 meters times 5 meters, and we will sell game there, but main goal for that Essen would be to actually find a real proper publisher to publish Through the Ages. So our goal was not to actually start CGE or real publishing company. So we founded non-profit organization here in Czech Republic to support Czech designers, Czech board game designers. As a product of that for this first year would be Through the Ages and going to Essen with it and trying to find a publisher for it. So we found it together with some other people. We were working on it. It was not easy to do that because we all had regular jobs, and so we worked on it only during the evenings and weekends. Fortunately, back then I didn't have any children, so it was easier than it would be now. Vlaada, since he's programmer, he made his own online implementation of this game, so we played it online a few times, and after we kind of committed to actually develop Through the Ages and make it in Essen and sell it there, I really committed to play it a lot, so nearly every evening I played at least one game of Through the Ages. So I had something like 150 plays of Through the Ages before it was released in something like half a year. So it was intensive.
That was, till this day, the craziest rush I've ever experienced. And it was due to a very big lack of experience and knowledge and whatnot. You know, we thought that producing such a game when you have 365 unique cards is simple. You print them, you cut them, you sort them, you put them into the box. That wasn't the case. I found a production guy because, you know, before CGE and before United Kingdom, I worked at advertising agencies as graphic designer. So I knew some production guys. I called one, you know, a good one. I told him about this game and he said, yeah, sure, I'll help you. Little did he know what he stepped into.
The wooden components from Through the Ages never arrived, but in the last moment, Peter managed to get some other wooden components from a toy company that was going bankrupt, so that's why there were these cones in the first edition of Through the Ages. And the cards didn't have a better fate either. The production company that was supposed to sort them created a terrible mess.
We're doing something they had no idea what they are doing. So minute in, I knew that this is disaster. So I called them to stop. We packed everything, put everything in boxes, like, you know, it was a big mess of cards. I think we printed 1,000 of English copies and maybe 400 of Czech copies. I might be wrong with these numbers. Times 365, a lot of cards. So we started to call everybody, and we gathered everybody at Paluba, which is, I don't know if the very first, but one of the very first Czech board games. It's not even pub. It's like a small basement studio or something like that, where you can play board games. Yeah, there are members and whatnot. So we bring everything there. We had the trucks coming with the boxes, with wooden parts, with glass parts, with all the bits and pieces. And we created our production line of own. It took us the whole weekend, all night. It was crazy when we managed to sort out everything and then pack everything together. To this day, I'm amazed how little error we made. Like, not too many copies were missing something or something like that. But it was crazy.
But we made it in the end and came to Essen as Czech Board Games, that non-profit organization, and we released Through the Ages there.
We brought it to Essen. It was a very crude copy. Cards didn't have any round corners and whatnot. It was really not really good production by any means, but the game was sold surprisingly well. We were lucky enough because there was another Vlaada's game, Greenland, which got a lot of buzz. And thanks to it, we knew that we are bringing much better game. So we kind of, with our enthusiasm, we kind of sold it to people. And it got a lot of attention, a lot of traction, a lot of momentum, and we saw how well it goes.
So in 2006, I'd been going to Essen for about 7 or so years, and I love civilization-style games. My friends were told me, oh, there's this new company that nobody's ever heard of from the Czech Republic, and they've got this civilization-style card game. So straight away, I was like, oh, it's a civilization-style game. I must go and have a look at it. And that was 2006, and it was Through the Ages. So it wasn't CGE at that point, it was CBG. And I just went along. Of course, I didn't know anybody at the booth. I didn't know who Vlaada was, and I got this game. And I got it home, and I just played it constantly for days. So every year, a month after Essen, I host a games weekend at my house. And it is an opportunity for me to play through all of the games that I brought back from that Essen with the friends of mine who weren't able to go. And that year, all I did was play Through the Ages non-stop, right? For 3 days, I hosted a games weekend at my house, and everybody else was playing all of the other games, and I just played Through the Ages. Fantastic game, still in my top 3 games of all time, loved it.
So I met, probably like most people, I met them at Essen. At the time, I was the owner of Z-Man Games, or Z-Man Games, and I was always on the lookout for new games, of course, and also new partners. And CBG at the time, they were new on the scene, and I think that was their first year in 2007 at that show. And they were pushing, they had 2 games that I remember. One was Through the Ages, and the other was, I think, Granaland or something, or Greenland kind of thing. And I was interested in Greenland, and I was interested in Through the Ages. I got to play 1 round of Through the Ages. At the time, I thought, man, with those little yellow tokens, it's like I can't even get my fingers. But it was interesting. It was a Civ game, but it was getting a little buzz, but not, I don't think so much, at least at the time. But I think Greenland got bigger buzz. But it was strange because also, speaking with Vlaada, I found out about his game Prophecy. And that was through, I think, Albi was the company that had Prophecy. So anyhow, after talking with them, and they were all great. They were new players, we had a good feeling towards each other. So after the show, actually even during the show, I was starting to bid on the games, Greenland and Through the Ages. But then I found out all of a sudden there were many other companies interested in Greenland and Through the Ages as well. And it got to the point where, you know what, I don't want to be in a bidding war. I don't want to have to fight. And I think even after Essen, we were talking, and I said, you know what, you do what you want with those 2 games. I'm interested in Prophecy. And then I talked with Vlaada and Albi separately, and I was able to acquire Prophecy. So I didn't get Through the Ages. Probably a bad decision. I should have kept it. But Greenland, it wasn't for me in the end. So I was okay with that one. But Through the Ages, I regretted letting go.
Back then, we didn't know that, publishers are already trying to buy new games on Wednesday before Spiel is open. So many people actually came to our booth and actually bought Through the Ages and also Greenland. We were shocked that so many people already bought the games, and many of them actually played it on Wednesday evening. And on Thursday morning, we already have somebody who came to us and said, I want to publish this game. So our goal to find a real publisher was achieved already basically before the show even started. Unfortunately, later on we found that, that publisher was not really experienced publisher, and since they were producing in China, there were some things not as good as in our version also, but they managed to release it at some point later. But one thing I remember, which was tipping point for me, was when I found that they basically, that publisher who acquired rights for Through the Ages, they would like to publish it basically as it is, without any further development of the game, without making really good illustrations for cards and design of cards and everything. They just wanted to make a nicer picture for the box and few tweaks, which were not that important actually. After I saw that, I felt like, okay, so maybe what we did was enough for making it as a living, and so I decided to stop basically my previous enterprise and publishing board games full time.
Afterwards, we decided we don't want to stay this non-profit organization CBG, Czech Board Games, but we wanted to transition to, to make this our living. So we founded a company, Czech Games Edition. We wanted to be kind of similar in the name and in the graphics to CBG. So we did that. We created kind of similar logo. Because back then, I think CBG was the very first company from the Eastern Bloc, so-called former Eastern Bloc, which was actually in the Essen. Nowadays you have Ukrainians and Belarusian people and all of these nationalities. Back then we were the first. So we were looked upon really curiously, who are these guys? What are they trying to sell us? We wanted to show the brand, the Czech colors and everything, which was the idea in both the CBG and CGE. And that's basically how CG started. So, then Vlaada and my brother sat together and they founded the company, and I was kind of like the very first employee, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And we realized that that's actually a great thing to do for living also, yeah. So several of us quit our jobs and started to create board games and founded Czech Games Edition.
Oh, no vision. Bunch of friends creating board games, that's all. Because we knew we had Vlaada on board, who we valued very, very much because, making his own designs, which we really adored. And we knew that, every year Vlaada brought so many great designs that we were not afraid to, to just keep bringing the games we love. That's all.
I was thinking, this game is too hard to be played or loved or something. This time I went really too far. I had this with Through the Ages, even Dungeon Lords. Then I published Mage Knight and said, okay, this time it's really too much. I would personally not play it. But still there was lots of people that played it and loved it. And so, okay, the players are actually more tough than I thought, and that's great.
The first time we've played Through the Ages, it took us the whole day, just learning the game, and playing one game took us about maybe 5 hours, something like that. And it was really fun. We really enjoyed it. And ever since then, it's still one of my most favorite games until now.
There kept being people playing Through the Ages next to me on the table while I was playing Galaxy Trucker and Ticket to Ride. I was like, that game looks so cool, I want to play it. And everyone was like, you're not ready to play that game. But I did it anyway, and I lost horribly. I had no idea what I was doing, but I had a lot of fun. And then I played Through the Ages a lot, and a lot, and a lot, and a lot.
It made me cry, actually. Not sure if once or twice. I was angry, I was sad, and then I finally realized how board games, even with just cards and little cubes, there is nothing personal actually, but it can touch you really deeply.
Through the Ages was essentially the first game of CGE, but it was finally redone and released under CGE in 2015 with a brand new edition.
One thing about Vlaada, not many people probably know, is he's very into thinking everything through, very, very much, right? Especially when it comes to balancing, he is like the whole Through the Ages process, like making this new version of Through the Ages, was mostly figuring out the balancing, and it took ages. But I mean, we did a very good job. Like this edition of Through the Ages is quite amazingly like put together and streamlined and balanced and everything.
So that was the start of CGE, just a couple of friends making games. Now there's a lot more people in the CGE family, a lot more games, a fancy office, and so on. But back in 2007, things were slightly different.
The office. It used to be a tiny office where me and Peter and sometimes Philip were crammed together in a small space.
If you want to call it office, then sure.
Or you can say a cellar. It was about 2 to 2 meters or something like that, very small.
That my brother, he had this apartment at Kladno, the city of Herbert, and he lived in this small apartment in this panel house, and at the very bottom was this something we call kočárkárna, like a trolley place or something, and he hired it and made a very crude office. It was like half of the size of this room.
So that tiny room became our first office for something like first 5 years or something like that.
It was more wild. Now it's you have people who take care of this stuff. So you go ask them. Back then it was either figure it out yourself, just make a decision, or ask Peter. That was the only other person who was there.
It was obvious from the start it's going to be successful. Nobody knew how successful. But Vlaada's creativity and the things he brings to CG and their games is really something else, in my opinion. And I think you can see a lot of his soul, if you will, in CG products. And till this day, even though I think he's not as active anymore as he used to, especially since CG Digital. Still, you can feel the character of his design and influence all over CG games.
Actually, I miss this feeling of adventure. At that moment, it was like a really survival game. Yeah, we have to publish games that will be successful to survive in the business. We started the company. To be able to create games, we were not thinking, okay, we can run some business. What about board games?
Many people can tell you the same about when they were younger and working on some passionate project. That it was really thrilling.
It was thrilling, yeah. It was great and difficult cooperative game, yeah.
Played it a lot. That's the beauty of it, you get to do what you love because it's a dream job. Because you are playing games and you're working hard.
This one of the first prototypes of Galaxy Tracker before we started to work on it.
It was so entertaining, and it's one of the few times in my life where I played a game And as soon as it was over, I said, we have to play that again. And how do I get a copy of this? I want a copy of this right now.
On the set on the comic book store, I did try to strategically place various board games. You can see a copy of Space Alert behind the counter.